She thought I was weak, that I'd cry, beg, maybe even apologize for not fulfilling her needs. But instead, I met her lover's wife, and together we did something much, much better. Started with a single email, a stupid mistake on her part. And before I knew it, I wasn't just a betrayed husband. I was a man with a plan. A plan that involved hotel rooms, revenge, and the kind of justice no marriage counselor would ever recommend. So, you ever have one of those moments where life slaps you across the face and says, "Hey buddy, guess what? You're the dumbass in this story." Yeah. That was me, Tuesday night, standing in my kitchen, staring at my wife's laptop. It wasn't even some grand snooping mission. I was just looking up the weather. The weather, for God's sake. But then I saw it, an open email. Subject line: "Last night was amazing." Now, I'm not a genius, but I'm also not an idiot. My wife, Sophie, is not a poet. She's not out here writing heartfelt letters to her girlfriends about how much fun they had at brunch. No. This was something else. My hands? Shaking. My stomach? In my socks. But I clicked. And there it was. A love letter. Scratch that, a lust letter. Sent from some guy named Greg. Greg. Even his name pissed me off. I scrolled. And with every word, the pit in my stomach grew deeper. They weren't just talking about last night. They were talking about last week. Last month. They had a routine. Hotels. Excuses. Secret codes in texts. And then the real gut punch, photos. Sophie, my wife, the woman I married, tangled up in the sheets of some shitty Marriott with a guy who looked like a knockoff finance bro. I mean, if you're gonna cheat, at least upgrade. But no, she went for Greg. I closed the laptop, took a deep breath. I could have screamed, flipped the table, punched a hole in the drywall like every guy in a bad breakup movie. But I didn't, because in that moment, something else clicked. She thought I was weak, but she had no idea who she was dealing with. You ever get hit with a truth so ugly, so undeniable, that your brain just refuses to process it for a second? Like, nah, this can't be real. This isn't my life. Someone switched the script on me. That was me, standing in my kitchen, staring at Sophie's laptop. But I wasn't about to sit there like some clueless idiot in a bad soap opera. I needed more. Real proof. Not just a single email she could gaslight me over. So I started digging. First, the email thread. Their messages weren't just flirty, they were comfortable. This wasn't some one-night mistake. These two had a whole system. Then I checked our phone records. Turns out my wife, who hates talking on the phone, had somehow found the time for hours of late-night calls. Then the worst part, the shared cloud storage. I don't know why she was dumb enough to sync her photos, but hey, her mistake. One click, and there it was. Picture. A selfie of them in a hotel mirror. Greg, who looked exactly like the kind of guy who calls waiters boss. Standing behind my wife, his hands all over her, and her, smiling, like she had no husband waiting at home. I sat there, staring at that picture, feeling something new. Not sadness, not even rage. Clarity. This wasn't just cheating. This was stupidity. And Sophie was about to learn just how stupid she had been. So now I had the what, the when, and the how. The only thing left, the who. Greg. Just saying the name made me want to punch something. It's a weak-ass name. No offense if you know a Greg, but let's be real. Nobody's ever been intimidated by a Greg. But I needed more than just a name. So, like any self-respecting man on a mission, I went full detective mode. First stop, social media. One quick search, and there he was, Greg Thompson, finance bro, CrossFit enthusiast, and oh, would you look at that, married. That's right. My wife wasn't just hooking up with some single guy in her free time. She was part of an equal opportunity betrayal program. I clicked on his profile. His wife was all over it. Emily. Pretty, blonde. Looked way too good for a guy like Greg. Their anniversary photos were barely a month old. Big smiles, beach trip, #blessed. I couldn't help but laugh. This guy was living a double life, posting cherish every moment with your partner on Instagram while blowing up my wife's inbox with God, I need you again texts. Pathetic, but also useful, because now I had an idea. I wasn't just going to expose Sophie. I was going to introduce myself to Emily. Alright, so now I knew my wife's secret lover wasn't just some random Greg, he was married Greg. And his wife, Emily? Completely oblivious. At first, I wasn't sure what to do with that information. I mean, the obvious move was to confront Sophie, scream, throw some shit, maybe even get one of those dramatic divorce lawyer billboards involved. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that's exactly what she expected me to do. She thought I'd lose my mind, maybe cry, maybe even blame myself. Yeah. No, I wasn't about to give her the satisfaction of seeing me broken. And if I was going to burn my marriage to the ground, I was damn well taking hers down with it. So I made a decision. I was going to tell Emily. Now, there are a few ways to break the news to someone that their spouse is cheating. You can go the anonymous route, drop some screenshots in her DMs and let her spiral on her own. You can go full scorched earth, post it all over social media and tag her entire family. Or you can be strategic.
Chose stratégique.
I sent Emily a simple, anonymous message. Hey, I think you might want to check your husband's emails. Something doesn't add up. Then I waited. It took less than an hour for her to reply. Who is this? I didn't answer. I just sent her one of the photos I found in the cloud. Greg and Sophie, cozy in their hotel room like a couple of teenagers who just discovered room service. No words, just the picture. Took another 15 minutes before she messaged back. Where did you get this? Still, I said nothing. I wanted her to think, to wonder, to start seeing cracks in her perfect little life. And then, the final move, I sent one last message. We need to talk. In person. She hesitated. Then, finally, where? I smiled. Checkmate. So, there I was, sitting in a coffee shop, waiting to meet the wife of the man my wife had been screwing. Weird situation, right? Like, this is the kind of thing that happens in bad Netflix thrillers, not real life. And yet, there I was, sipping burnt coffee, watching the door, wondering what the hell I was supposed to say to this woman. Emily. I'd done my research. Greg's wife of 7 years, mother of 2, part-time interior designer, full-time, I married an asshole survivor. Her Instagram was filled with those perfectly curated posts. Matching family pajamas at Christmas, date nights at steakhouses, selfies with captions like, "Forever my person," under pictures of her and Greg. Looking at it made me feel something I wasn't expecting. Pity. Because I knew exactly what kind of woman she was. She was me. The one who believed their marriage was solid. The one who thought their partner was their best friend. The one who would have defended their spouse against any accusation because, come on, they would never do something like that. Until they did. The bell above the cafe door jingled. And there she was. Emily was stunning. I won't lie. Blonde, sharp cheekbones. That effortless kind of beauty that makes you wonder if she ever has an off day. She had that upper-middle-class put-together look, good nails, expensive bag, the kind of clothes that say I shop responsibly, but also don't ask how much these boots cost. But the moment she spotted me, I saw something else. Panic. She knew. She didn't know everything yet, but she knew enough to be terrified. She sat down across from me, folding her hands neatly on the table like she was bracing for impact. You sent me those pictures. Not a question. I nodded. She inhaled sharply. I could see the struggle happening in real time. Half of her wanted to grab her bag and run, pretend none of this was real. The other half, the stronger half, that one needed answers. How do you know Greg? She asked, voice tight. I gave a humorless laugh. I don't, but I know my wife. And apparently, she knows your husband. Biblically. She flinched like I'd slapped her. And just like that, the mask cracked. Her perfect posture slumped. Her eyes darted to the table, then back up to me. I could see her doing the mental math, replaying every moment in her head, every late meeting Greg had, every weird excuse. How long? She whispered. At least 6 months. Probably longer. Her fingers curled into fists. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Just two strangers sitting across from each other, bound together by the same awful truth. Then, finally, she let out a shaky breath and looked me dead in the eye. What are we going to do about it? And that, That's when things really got interesting. You ever watch a dam break? Not all at once, but slowly. First a crack, then a trickle, and before you know it, the whole thing collapses? That's what happened to Emily. The moment I told her how long it had been going on, she stopped being the polished, put-together woman who had walked into that coffee shop. Her hands started shaking. She pressed them against her lap, like she was physically trying to hold herself together. "I knew something was wrong," she muttered. Not to me, more like to herself. I didn't want to believe it. I stayed quiet. Because what the hell do you say to that? Congrats, your gut was right, your husband's a cheating bastard? Emily leaned back in her chair and exhaled slowly. Jesus Christ. Yeah, I said. She ran a hand through her hair, and for the first time, I saw past the perfect Instagram life. Her nails were chipped, her eyeliner was smudged, and her eyes? Her eyes had that same dead, exhausted look I'd seen in the mirror for the past week. "So," she said finally, looking back at me, "what now? Do we tell them we know? Do we confront them together?" I considered it. The idea of walking into my house, slamming Sophie's laptop on the table, and watching her scramble for excuses? Yeah, that was tempting. But then I thought about it. The way Sophie had lied to my face. The way Greg had kissed his wife goodbye, then gone straight to another woman's bed. Confronting them wasn't justice. It was a chance for them to lie their way out of it. "No," I said. "Not yet." Emily frowned. "Then what?" And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about exposing them. It was about ruining them. Emily must have seen the shift in my expression, because she narrowed her eyes. "What are you thinking?" I leaned forward. "I think we should make them feel exactly as stupid, used, and humiliated as we do right now." And slowly, Emily started to smile. If someone had told me a week ago that I'd be sitting across from my wife's lover's wife, planning revenge, I would have laughed in their face. But there we were. And the weirdest part? I was starting to like Emily. Not in a flirty way, at least not yet. But in a holy shit, I'm not alone in this kind of way. After our initial shock wore off, we started trading stories, filling in gaps. The more we talked, the more obvious it became. Greg and Sophie weren't just cheaters. They were sloppy cheaters. Emily laughed bitterly, stirring her untouched coffee. "He told me he started working out in the mornings. That's why he was showering at the office." She shook her head. "Jesus, I'm an idiot." "You're not an idiot," I said. "You trusted your husband. That's kind of the whole point of marriage." She snorted. "Yeah? And what about you? Did you have any idea?" I hesitated. Then, honestly, I don't know. Maybe deep down, yeah. I just didn't want to believe it. She nodded like she understood exactly what I meant. And I guess she did. We sat in silence for a moment, just absorbing the absurdity of it all. Then Emily sighed. "I don't want to be that woman, you know? The one who stays and forgives because it's easier. But," she trailed off, chewing her lip. "But it's terrifying," I finished for her. Her eyes flicked to mine, and I saw it, the same fear I had. Because no matter how angry we were, no matter how much we wanted revenge, there was one brutal truth neither of us could escape. If we went through with this, if we exposed them, humiliated them, destroyed them, our lives would never be the same. No more marriage. No more familiar routines. No more pretending. It was terrifying. But it was also liberating. Emily exhaled sharply, like she'd just made a decision. Then she leaned forward, her lips curling into a slow, dangerous smile. "Screw it," she said. "Let's burn this whole thing down." And just like that, we had a plan. Started as a joke. A dark, twisted, we're two people at rock bottom, so why not laugh about it kind of joke. We had been sitting in that coffee shop for over 2 hours, huddled together like war generals plotting a battle. Emily was the one who said it first, casually, like she wasn't even thinking. "You know," she mused, stirring the foam in her latte. "If we really wanted to get even, we could just sleep together." I barked out a laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was so ridiculous that my brain didn't know what else to do with it. "Oh yeah," I said, playing along. "That'd really screw with their heads." Emily smirked. I mean, think about it. They're off sneaking around behind our backs, probably thinking we're too clueless or too weak to do anything about it. Imagine their faces if they found out we did the same thing. She was still joking, I think. But something about it, about her, lingered in the air. She was beautiful, no denying that. And smart. And sharp. And pissed off in the exact same way I was. And suddenly, the idea didn't seem so ridiculous. I met her gaze, and for the first time, neither of us was laughing. I should have shut it down. Should have said something rational, like revenge sleepover won't fix this. But then Emily tilted her head, studying me like she was seeing me differently, and I felt it. A shift. Not just anger. Not just betrayal. Something else. I mean, she said, slow and deliberate. It'd only be fair, right? My pulse kicked up. Because now I wasn't sure if we were joking anymore. We didn't go to her place. Or mine. That would have been too messy, too real. Instead, we ended up at a hotel. The same kind Sophie and Greg had been sneaking around in. That part wasn't planned, it just happened. One moment, we were sitting in her car, still playing that dangerous game of, are we really going to do this? The next, we were stepping into an elevator, the air between us thick enough to choke on. Neither of us said a word as we walked down the hallway. At the door, Emily hesitated, her hand hovering over the keycard slot. This is insane, she muttered. Yeah, I agreed. She turned to look at me, searching my face for something. Doubt, hesitation, guilt. She didn't find any, so she swiped the card. The second the door shut behind us, the dam broke. This wasn't about love. Hell, I don't even know if it was about lust. It was about taking something back. About not feeling like the pathetic ones, the clueless spouses waiting at home while our partners screwed each other. It was messy, and desperate, and just the right amount of angry. I remember gripping the back of her neck, pulling her into me like I was starving. I remember the way she gasped, like she had been holding her breath since the moment she saw that first photo of Greg and Sophie. I remember not thinking for the first time in weeks. When it was over, we lay there in silence, both of us staring at the ceiling. The weight of what we'd just done settled in, but not in the way I expected. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel dirty. I felt even. Emily let out a soft, bitter laugh. Guess we're just as bad as them now. I turned my head to look at her. No, I said. They lied. They snuck around. They built a whole fantasy world behind our backs. I exhaled. We just gave them a taste of their own medicine. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. And just like that, neither of us regretted it. Emily was the one who had the idea. We were lying there, the adrenaline still fading, the hotel room still thick with everything we had just done. Neither of us had moved. Neither of us wanted to. Then she shifted, reaching for her phone on the nightstand. What if we made sure they found out? She murmured. I turned my head to look at her. What do you mean? She propped herself up on one elbow, biting her lip like she was deciding whether or not to say what was in her head. Then, finally, they humiliated us. Her fingers traced lazy patterns on the sheet. They snuck around, lied to our faces, built this whole little world where they got to have their fun while we stayed home like idiots. I felt my jaw tighten, because she was right. So, she continued, holding up her phone, why don't we show them that they don't own the game?
Hier.
She wanted to take a picture. A part of me hesitated. Not because I was ashamed, far from it, but because this felt like the moment we officially crossed from revenge into war. You really want to do this? I asked. Emily smirked, her eyes dark with something I hadn't seen before. Don't you? I didn't even have to think about it. So we took the picture. Nothing graphic. Nothing trashy. Just the perfect shot. Emily in my arms, both of us tangled in the sheets, her fingers resting against my bare chest, my hand gripping her waist like I wasn't letting go anytime soon. It was intimate, suggestive, just enough to send a very clear message. She looked at the screen, then at me. Should we send it now? I thought about it. Sending it now would be satisfying, sure, but why rush? Greg and Sophie had spent months, maybe years, sneaking around behind our backs. They thought they had all the power. I wanted them to wonder. Not yet, I said, smirking. Let's make them sweat first. Emily grinned, setting her phone back down. And just like that, the game had officially changed. You know that feeling when someone has already betrayed you, but they don't know you know yet? When you're just watching them, observing every lie they tell, every excuse they make, and realizing just how stupid they think you are? Yeah. That was my house for the next few days. Sophie was still playing the role of loving wife, kissing me on the cheek before work, asking me if I wanted anything from the store, lying through her teeth right to my face. And the best part? I didn't let on. I played along. I told her I love yous and sent her smiling emojis. I acted like the same clueless idiot she thought she'd married. And all the while I watched her. The little things gave her away. The way she'd glance at her phone, then flip it face down. The way she'd come home and hug me just a little too tight, like she was trying to convince herself she still loved me. She even had the nerve to ask if I wanted to go on a weekend trip. Just the two of us. I almost laughed in her face. Instead, I smiled. That sounds nice, babe. Meanwhile, Emily was playing the same game with Greg. She texted me late at night, venting about how unbearable it was. He kissed me on the forehead today, like he actually loves me. He brought me flowers. I think I hate him. How the hell did we not see it before? I had no answer for that, because I was asking myself the same thing. It was a strange thing, living with someone who had already broken you, watching them act normal, watching them sit next to you on the couch, scrolling through their phone, while you knew they were waiting for a text from their affair partner. But the strangest part? I wasn't even angry anymore. Anger was before. When I first found the emails, when I first saw the photos. That was rage. Now I was just focused. Because Emily and I had a plan. And it was time to set the trap. There's a special kind of satisfaction in watching someone walk straight into their own downfall. Greg's networking event was the perfect setup. It wasn't some small get-together, it was big. Fancy venue, expensive suits, people clinking glasses and pretending they weren't just there to stroke their own egos. And Sophie? She was glowing. She loved events like these. Loved dressing up. Loved being on Greg's arm. Loved pretending she was some kind of power couple's wife. It made me sick to think about how many of these she had probably attended while I was home like a damn idiot, thinking she was at work functions. Emily and I arrived separately. We weren't about to tip them off too soon. I spotted Sophie first, standing by the bar, swirling a glass of wine, laughing at something Greg whispered in her ear. She looked happy, relaxed. I wanted to ruin it. Emily and I made eye contact across the room. She gave me the smallest nod. Game time. I made my way to the bar, standing just a few feet from them, close enough for Sophie to notice. And when she did, oh, the way her face changed. Her eyes widened, just for a second, before she schooled her expression into something neutral. But I caught it, that flicker of panic. That moment of oh shit, what is he doing here? Greg was still talking, completely oblivious. I smiled at Sophie, raised my glass slightly. Cheers, honey. Her grip on her wine glass tightened. Then, Emily made her entrance. And that was when things really got good. She walked in like she owned the place. Black dress, red lipstick, hair styled in a way that said I know exactly what I'm doing. And she did. Because Greg saw her. And his reaction? Immediate panic. His shoulders stiffened. His smile froze. And then, instinctively, he reached for his phone. Emily's phone buzzed. She pulled it out, smirked, and showed me the screen. A text from Greg. What are you doing here? Emily didn't respond. Instead, she turned to me, rested her hand lightly on my arm, and laughed at something I whispered, loud enough for Sophie to hear. Greg was now fully stiff, glancing between me and Emily like his brain was short-circuiting. Sophie, meanwhile, was gripping her wine glass so hard I thought she might snap the stem. She grabbed her phone, probably about to text me some fake, cheery excuse. But before she could type a single word, Emily pulled out her own phone, tapped a button, and sent the picture. To both of them. Sophie's phone buzzed. Greg's phone buzzed. I watched it happen in real time. Sophie blinked at her screen, confusion flickering first. Then realization. Then absolute, gut-wrenching horror. Greg had the same reaction. His face drained of color so fast I thought he might pass out. Emily? She just sipped her champagne. I leaned in, voice low, calm, deadly. Checkmate. And that was the moment everything fell apart. I have to be honest, watching them unravel in real time was better than I imagined. Sophie's hand shot out to grab my wrist, her grip tight. We need to talk. Right now. Greg was already hissing something at Emily, his face twisted in pure panic. He tried to pull her aside, but she just yanked her arm free and took another casual sip of champagne, like she was enjoying a show. Sophie's nails dug into my skin. Outside. Now. I tilted my head. Why? Something wrong. Her face twisted. She glanced around, suddenly aware that we weren't alone. People were watching. Not many, but enough. Her work friends, Greg's colleagues, people who would love a little scandal to gossip about. She forced a smile. Please. I followed her because I wanted to see her squirm. We barely made it outside before she lost it. What the hell is wrong with you? She screamed, eyes wild. Are you seriously trying to humiliate me in front of everyone? I raised an eyebrow. Oh, now you care about humiliation? That's interesting. Her mouth opened, then snapped shut. She knew she had no ground to stand on. This? She gestured wildly, trying to find the words. You and Emily? That's not the same thing. I actually laughed.
No.
I pulled out my phone, scrolled through her emails, the ones I had forwarded to myself, and held it up to her face. So this wasn't cheating? These weren't lies? That wasn't you screwing Greg while I was at home being the dumb, loyal husband? Sophie's face drained of color. She opened her mouth again, but I was done. Save it, I said, voice calm. You don't get to be angry. You don't get to play the victim. You wanted to cheat? Lie? Humiliate me? Fine. But now, you get to feel what it's like. Her breath hitched. For the first time, she actually looked scared. Not just of losing me, but of losing the perfect little image she had built. And I was going to let it burn. I turned to walk away, leaving her standing there, mouth open, hands shaking. Inside, Emily was still at the bar, watching Greg fumble through whatever bullshit excuse he was trying to spin. She met my eyes, smirked, and raised her glass. I smirked back, because this was only the beginning. You'd think the aftermath would be messy. Screaming, crying, dramatic public breakdowns. But honestly, it was pathetic. Sophie and Greg didn't even try to fight back. Greg practically begged Emily to step outside with him. She did for exactly 3 minutes. When she came back in, she looked bored. He blamed me, she said, rolling her eyes. Said I drove him to it because I wasn't affectionate enough. Can you believe that? Actually, yeah, I said. Sounds like a Greg thing to say. We clinked glasses. Sophie, meanwhile, wasn't handling it quite as well. She had followed me back inside, hovering near the exit like she was waiting for the right moment to corner me again. I ignored her. I let her sit in it. And the best part? The news was already spreading. We didn't have to do a damn thing. People noticed. The way Greg was frantically texting. The way Sophie looked like she was about to throw up. The way Emily and I were so obviously together. It wasn't long before someone, a coworker of Sophie's, I think, leaned in and whispered, "What's going on?" I just smiled. Oh, nothing. Just some good old-fashioned karma. That's all it took. The whisper mill exploded. Sophie and Greg didn't last the night. Greg practically dragged her out the door, probably hoping to salvage something before the damage became permanent. But it was already too late. Emily and I stayed. We drank. We laughed. We let them disappear while we enjoyed the hell out of the evening. And at some point, after another drink, after another sharp joke that made Emily throw her head back laughing, she tilted her head at me, studying me like she had back in that coffee shop. "So what now?" she asked. I knew what she meant. The revenge was done. The game was over. But whatever this thing between us was, that was still there. I let the question sit for a second. Then, I reached out, brushed my fingers against hers on the bar top. I don't know, I admitted, but I'm not in a rush to find out. She smiled, and neither was she. Sophie tried to fix things. She cried. She begged. She swore it was a mistake. I didn't listen. There was nothing left to save. Greg didn't even try. Emily left him before he had the chance. Divorce papers came fast. Clean, efficient, final. Emily and I, we didn't label anything. We just kept seeing each other. Maybe it was trauma bonding. Maybe it was something real. All I knew was, for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel stupid. I didn't feel weak. I felt free. And damn, that felt good.